Did you realize that you were a champion in their eyes? Their eyes. Their eyes. Their eyes.
This is the Logitech G502 gaming mouse. It's not a bad mouse per se, but as newer and newer gaming mice arrive in the market, I find it harder and harder to recommend this gaming mouse like I have in the past and like many other people online on the internet. So the G502 is not a bad mouse. I mean, it's got a great design. It looks really nice with that kind of gamer aesthetic that isn't too over the top. It's built very well, assembled like a tank. The on-on switches definitely feel pretty darn good, and the sensor is also very, very nice. It's a PMW3366 on the older sensor, and on the new sensor mice, it's the Hero sensor, which is also a very, very good gaming mouse sensor. So basically, this is a really good package, right? Well, the problem with it is that it's a design that came out 5 years ago. In the world of technology, 5 years is a century. And frankly, with every new release, the G502 just seems like less of a compelling choice. While at launch, the G502 seemed to be untouchable, right now, the G502 just doesn't seem like that great of a compelling option in today's gaming mouse world. So the first reason why the G502 is not that great of a choice, well, it's the weight. The G502 is kind of a fat and a heavy mouse, back then and right now. Even at launch, the G502 was one of the heaviest mice on the market, weighing more than 100 grams without the cable and without the optional weights. This was compared to kind of the average of 90 to 80 grams of gaming mice back then without the cable. Now it's even worse because there's just more and more focus on a lighter mouse. For example, finalmouse released the finalmouse Ultra, Phantom and Ultra Sunset and whatnot, and all those mice came with holes drilled in them just to save weight. That's kind of the extreme lengths companies are going to make their mice lighter. Even Logitech themselves with the gpro wireless put such a huge emphasis on a light wireless good gaming mouse that they made the material super thin, and they spent millions of R&D dollars just to design a wireless gaming mouse that was as light as a equivalent wired gaming mouse. So it's clear to see, in a world where everything is lighter, the G502 is just too heavy. Of course, the point could be made that it's personal preference. You like yourself a heavier mouse. But the thing is, if you like a heavier mouse, wouldn't it be nice to just have the flexibility to adjust the heaviness of the mouse to your desired level by having a light mouse in the start and adding weights on later? On top of that, studies have shown that you should probably get used to using a lighter mouse since, you know, it puts less strain on your wrist, it lowers the chance of RSI, and it's just a better idea to use a lighter mouse. And in my opinion, switching from a G502 to a G102, which was much lighter, was so much more comfortable, even though the G502's grip was actually better than the G102. So I don't think there's really any reason not to want a mouse that's lighter to begin with, even if you're going to add weights on later. Second, the G502 is quite a clunky mouse. The scroll wheel, for example, it's too tall, it's too slippery, and it's too goddamn heavy. On top of that, the cyclic features cause the mouse wheel to be loose, which means it rattles if you flick your mouse too hard. That makes a noise that is kind of annoying, and sometimes my microphone picks it up. And my friends online on Discord will complain about it, and that's not a good thing. Of course, it can be fixed with some microphone placement adjustments, but for a $100 mouse, you shouldn't be having these issues, frankly. It just shouldn't. On top of that, the extra buttons designed for extra functionality are also not conveniently placed. In fact, they're quite clumsily scattered all over the mouse, meaning the user experience once again is clunky. The top buttons on the left of the left click are either too hard to reach or too easy to reach, meaning I don't use either of them often, if not at all. And the thumb buttons, well, all but one of them, the one directly above the thumb, are too hard to reach for me, which means I don't also use them as well. Apart from that, the right click of the G502 is also much stiffer than the left click, meaning it feels very weird to right click on this, which sucks. And also the weight balance of the G502 is kind of off, causing it to kind of feel like it's tipping over all the damn time. It doesn't seem too bad of issues, and I'm almost like nitpicking here, but because there's so much competition that don't have these issues, I have to point them out and tell you that that's the reason why the G502 is not a great choice. And there are more reasons to come. Thirdly, the shape and the size of the G502 is why I think it's not that good of a choice anymore. You see, the G502's shape is kind of specific. It's very well sculpted, but it seems like it's really tailored to a certain kind of hand size and palm size. While I find it to be really comfortable, I know many people that find the G502 to be too big or too small for their hands. Another thing to take into consideration is that, if your hands are bigger and you like using claw size, you would want a smaller mouse. But if your hands are smaller and you like a palm size, you would like a bigger mouse. Because the G502 has this very sculpted design, which is very comfortable, it results in a mouse that is very specific to a certain size of hands, and that is very important to take into consideration when deciding whether to buy a mouse like the G502 or not. If you're dropping $100 on a mouse, you don't want to have to return it or sell it because it didn't fit you well enough. And I don't think you should just blindly follow the recommendation that the G502 is the best mouse you can get, because there's so many more mice that could be a better fit for whatever kind of holding style you're using on your mouse and whatever size your hand is. It's a lot of variables, and frankly, you shouldn't just boil it down to one recommendation, the G502. It's a good feeling, comfortable to use ergonomic mouse, but I don't think it's the best for everyone. It's not even the best for me. Turns out I like a claw grip and the G102 is the mouse for me, but the G502 is quite comfortable. Fourth, the cable. It's braided, which I really don't like, but the problem with the braiding of this cable especially is that it's way too thick and way too rough. This adds a lot of weight and a lot of friction to your G502, especially if you don't use a mouse bungee or don't like using a mouse bungee. That is very important to consider. Because of the extra weight on top of a already heavy mouse, this braiding just makes the mouse a lot more clumsier to use. On top of that, every G502 I've used, or the 3 G502 I've used, have had their braiding wear off and start breaking really quickly. This G502, well, the cable's a wreck. It's been worn down to shreds. It's now just a rubber cable, which I personally don't mind. In fact, I'm quite happy the braiding is gone because I hated it a lot, but I had to wait for a couple of months before that even happened. Now that it's gone, the mouse feels much lighter, and it's clear to see that Logitech could have put a thinner braid on the cable. Either that, or they could have, not put braiding on the cable. But of course, braiding seems to be this premium-esque thing which companies are obsessed with, but I'm not personally. But that's something to take note of. Extra friction and extra weight coming from the very heavily braided cable. Also, the cable is kind of way too long for my use. In fact, the cable is so long I could plug this mouse into the PC on the table on the other side of the room, and I'll still have no problem using this mouse comfortably. It's bad. That's how long it is, and I guess it's good for flexibility, but it's terrible for cable management. I digress, but it's still a little nitpick there. While you might say the cable is not that big of a problem, if you compare it to the competition, it just tells me that no, the G502 is not that great of a choice anymore. So that leads me to the conclusion of this video. The G502 is not a bad mouse, but the thing is, it's an old design. Don't kill me, Logitech fans, but it's really not a good choice anymore. In fact, it's quite a bad choice if you were to choose it over many of the competition out there today. If you look at the other mice available right now from Logitech themselves, SteelSeries, Razer, Zowie, all these great mice companies, even finalmouse, they all make good mice now, and with so many options out there providing so many better versions of this mouse and better alternatives to this mouse, it's hard to say that this is the best choice. It's hard to say this is a good choice at all. Of course, if you are so in love with that shape, so in love with the whole design and that shape of the mouse, and you can look over the weight and the terrible braided cable, then yeah, the G502 is a good mouse. The Hero is really not that bad. But frankly, for most people, if you're not that passionately in love with the G502, I do recommend you look elsewhere and you start looking at different options and different alternatives to the G502, because they are out there and they are more than happy to be your new next mouse that's better than the G502 in every way possible. Thank you all so much for watching. If you found it helpful, if you want to argue with me, like and subscribe first, then argue with me in the comment section. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see some nice photos. Follow me on Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter, I guess. That's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.